where it surely could happen somewhere, and more than one somewheres. The more, the merrier. So, welcome. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you, Sandy, so much for reading that. I'd forgotten I'd written it actually, but it's really nice that you brought it up again. And my vision has probably darkened a tiny bit since I wrote that. But I still think, yeah, that there are hopeful, or I shouldn't say hopeful, but realistic, positive opportunities for people and realities that could happen, even though we all know that some kind of collapse is almost certain and probably underway right now. We can see the signs of it now, and I
Oh,
know
yeah.
all of your guests or many of your guests know that, right?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I would say that most everyone is, if they're not collapse accepted, they're collapse aware.
sure,
And we follow
absolutely.
a lot of the same people, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's great to see Paul Beckwith popping up on your channel. I always watch his videos to keep updated on what's going on
Absolutely.
in the Arctic and everything. And I love his kind of downbeat style.
He's great. He's a good
Yeah,
person, good friend, I consider. Yeah.
no bullshit.
No. Nope. Nope. So, Matthew, when you have this you had this brainstorm and collaboration, how did it actually start to do this project? I know you're going to talk about it, the ecological crisis, collapse, and revolutionary change. Talk about it. Give us the bullet points, the mission, vision, and values, although I read a little of it, of this project.
Okay, sure. Well, actually, I have to separate here between Epic Tomorrows and the book project.
Okay.
Um, Epic Tomorrows is kind of my personal activist project and YouTube channel, and that has definitely informed my thinking over the past few years, and really focused my mind on what kind of pathways I envisage forward for all of us and for myself. Um, but this particular book project about ecological crisis, collapse, and revolutionary change is with the charity publisher Arcbound,
Yes.
which is a UK based publisher. And that's nothing to do with Epic Tomorrows. Um, but I think the people at Arcbound they were aware of my work with Epic Tomorrows. And that's partly why they gave me this job of editing this book.
Okay.
And it's a multi author book. And the charity has always been about kind of diversity and platforming diverse voices in the publishing industry, because the publishing industry is not diverse enough. Um, so yeah, and we've already published.
Well, welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I am your host, Sandy Shellis, and today we have a special guest, Matthew Azulay. Epic Tomorrows is what I understand he calls himself, or the project. And he's going to talk a lot about it. But what I thought is I would start out with something that I think is quite beautiful. And Matthew wrote this, and he has a vision of Epic Tomorrows. And the vision goes way beyond the mission, because the vision is essentially the kind of planet I, meaning Matthew, optimistically envision being a reality a few decades from now. What all the work should point to. This is a vision of global society that has possibly, although ideally not, gone through severe collapse, including war, but which has rebirthed phoenix like into a post capitalist ecological form free of all oppressive hierarchies. While such a utopia may not be conceivable everywhere, it surely could happen somewhere, and more than one somewheres. The more, the merrier. So, welcome. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you, Sandy, so much for reading that. I'd forgotten I'd written it actually, but it's really nice that you brought it up again. And my vision has probably darkened a tiny bit since I wrote that. But I still think, yeah, that there are hopeful, or I shouldn't say hopeful, but realistic, positive opportunities for people and realities that could happen, even though we all know that some kind of collapse is almost certain and probably underway right now. We can see the signs of it now, and I
Oh,
know
yeah.
all of your guests, or many of your guests, know that, right?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I would say that most everyone is, if they're not collapse accepted, they're collapse aware.
sure,
And we follow
absolutely.
a lot of the same people, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's great to see Paul Beckwith popping up on your channel. I always watch his videos to keep updated on what's going on
Absolutely.
in the Arctic and everything. And I love his kind of downbeat style.
He's great. He's a good
Yeah,
person, good friend, I consider. Yeah.
no bullshit.
No. Nope. Nope. So, Matthew, when you have this you had this brainstorm and collaboration, how did it actually start to do this project? I know you're going to talk about it, the ecological crisis, collapse, and revolutionary change. Talk about it. Give us the bullet points, the mission, vision, and values, although I read a little of it, of this project.
Okay, sure. Well, actually, I have to separate here between Epic Tomorrows and the book project.
Okay.
Um, Epic Tomorrows is kind of my personal activist project and YouTube channel, and that has definitely informed my thinking over the past few years, and really focused my mind on what kind of pathways I envisage forward for all of us and for myself. Um, but this particular book project about ecological crisis, collapse, and revolutionary change is with the charity publisher Arcbound,
Yes.
which is a UK based publisher. And that's nothing to do with Epic Tomorrows. Um, but I think the people at Arcbound they were aware of my work with Epic Tomorrows. And that's partly why they gave me this job of editing this book.
Okay.
And it's a multi author book. And the charity has always been about kind of diversity and platforming diverse voices in the publishing industry, because the publishing industry is not diverse enough. Um, so yeah, and we've already published a couple of books about climate adaptation and mitigation. But just recently, the coordinator of Arcbound, Steve McNaught, he has become collapse aware himself. So
Ooh.
it's basically a good it was a complete chance that me and him kind of aligned on that kind of thinking. And so he was going to do the book himself, coordinate it, but he said he didn't have time anymore and would I like to take it on? And I've never edited a
Nice.
book in my life. So it's a really exciting
Ooh.
thing. I
I
have
would
edited
say
people's work, but not a whole book. And so yeah, I've been collecting.
congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
So I've been collecting stuff from all around the world, like writing to my existing activist contacts who I got through Epic Tomorrows for this book project. And it's going really well. We just need to raise a bit more money. We've just got 1 week left to raise like £1,500 on the
All right,
crowdfunding.
everybody. You hear that? I donated. You can too, and the link will be in the show notes.
Absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, if you want to ask me any more questions about the content,
Oh,
I mean, it's
sure.
quite a diverse book, but
I'd like
yeah.
we want to know all of it. What you hope to accomplish? Who's the audience? Is it something that can be a worldwide? Is it like a something people can use as their guide? Tell us
Okay.
about that.
Okay, well, that's great. It's kind of an anthology approach, so it's very eclectic, and it will be divided into three sections. The first section will be focused on our predicament. The opening chapter will be Dr. Bill McGuire, who's quite a well-known
Yes.
climate
Oh,
scientist,
yes.
and it's really great that he's on board. Also, Gail Bradbrook, co-founder of XR Extinction Rebellion, will be writing the foreword. Um, and then there's also going to be a bit in the first section about maladaptation to the ecological crisis, from diverse perspectives, particularly from my friend Violet Matiru, who's a Kenyan ecologist,
Hmm.
and she's gathering the accounts of different community members in Kenya of
Right.
how the climate crisis and the ecological crisis has been used as an excuse by big NGOs like WWF and the Nature Conservancy, who are going in and doing conservation, but it's not.
Yes.
I mean, maybe they do some good work in places, but
Hmm.
certainly they're doing a lot of bad work, and they're evicting indigenous people from their lands, um, and they're doing all of these carbon offsetting schemes, which are not actually working. They're kind of a scam. That sometimes they do
Yeah.
double accounting, where two companies are using the same trees and
Uh,
claiming that it's carbon offs. All this kind of stuff. So right after Bill Maguire's chapter, it's really good to have these accounts from Kenya, and it's happening all over Africa,
so
of the Western.
an expose in a sense.
It is definitely an expose, the
Hmm.
second chapter. And so we're starting to build up a picture of how bad things are, right? For people who already know, but maybe don't know some of the details, but also for other people who maybe they know that climate change is bad, but they don't realize too much about overshoot. So
There you
overshoot will
go.
be mentioned in the first chapter, in the
Beautiful.
first section, sorry.
Hmm.
Um, so Arcbound is kind of taking a bit of a radical direction with publishing this book, because our previous books haven't addressed collapse at all. So they're taking a little bit of a risk, you could say. But I'm trying to introduce the readers slowly. I don't want to hit them over the head straight away by
Right.
saying the world's going to end or whatever. Um,
Well, that's kind of a turnoff. I mean,
yeah,
you're doing it the right way.
sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, and then in the second section, we look at kind of revolutionary and radical responses to the predicament. There's nothing about violent revolution. I want to reassure people, but there is a realistic focus on kind of civil disobedience. I know you've spoken to Roger Hallam,
Hmm.
um, and also kind of community defense, communities defending themselves, and doing mutual aid, and the kind of anarchistic perspective of communities working together, deciding democratically what to do with their own resources, all of this kind of stuff. And in that section, I've got Jason Bayliss from a radicalguide.com, which is a directory of anarchist and kind of radical projects from around the world. And he's a very clever guy, because he's kind of making anarchism sexy and kind of mainstream. Like, because a lot of people think that anarchism is all about wearing black and like smashing windows and stuff.
Right.
But
Right. You're
actually,
exactly right. Yeah.
yeah, but most anarchists are peaceful people, and they're more focused on building community resources and community resilience. And I think in these times of collapse, that's what we need, right? Um, so there's a focus on that, and I would really, um, I'm going to be really interested in people's responses to that. People who don't really know much about that side of things. Um,
I think that's
and
much
yeah,
needed,
great,
especially
great,
now with what's
yeah,
happening. I mean, we just had the election in the United States. People are frightened. People need something to keep them meaningfully occupied and learn about what the potentials are to
absolutely,
do
yeah. I
things.
have I have to say I watched, because I do follow American politics a bit.
Oh, you
Um,
poor thing.
Yeah, I know. And yesterday morning, for some strange reason, I decided to watch Trump's victory speech. I thought I ought to try and understand what he was talking about. And I actually started crying, like unexpectedly. I didn't really, I don't usually do that when I'm watching the news, but I felt so, well, it was when he said, "Oh, and we've got a new star, Elon Musk." I actually felt so dark. I had this vision of like the American government joining with the big tech, and it just felt like such a dark future. I just started crying spontaneously. So that was my
You're
response
not
to,
alone.
yeah, no,
There's
sure,
millions of tears.
yeah, yeah,
But
exactly.
it seems apropos because collapse will probably be ushered in faster because of this. And so
Yeah,
your book and what your work, it could become a lot more important going forward. Let's
That's true.
hope.
Yeah, but I don't. I mean, I think we have to be careful not to wish collapse to accelerate too much because it's
Well, I
uh,
don't. But
no,
there
no,
are people that do,
yeah,
and in the doomer community, I'm not one of them.
no. That's good. Neither am
Mm,
I. That's what's known as accelerationism, right? Yeah, I don't, and that's kind of wishing potentially more suffering on people, isn't it? So
that's
yeah,
what I see it as. And
yeah,
although, these are people that I care about, this is and everyone is obviously entitled to their worldview. I'm not going to
yeah.
put anybody down, but that's
Mm,
why we are seeking to educate.
sure,
Correct?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the whole book basically is, I mean, I've talked about the first two sections,
Mm-hmm.
but I just want to read, before I talk about the last sections, I just want to say that the whole book really comes from a community perspective. It's really about platforming diverse communities from around the world and showing how some of these community responses are what we need, and we need diverse responses to overshoot and to collapse. And we don't want this, or in my view anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and in many of the authors' views, we don't want this top-down authoritarian government approach to responding to collapse, which is likely to be fascism, um, or even if it even like eco-Stalinism, eco-communism. We don't want that either. Like I don't anyway. I don't want that. So the book is all about more grassroots, diverse, decentralized power approaches to the predicament.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of putting forward in a very kind of subtle way. It's advocating for that kind of global response.
Yes.
Not every chapter will say that. Not every
Mm-hmm.
chapter, but like maybe Bill McGuire in the beginning, maybe he doesn't totally agree with that vision or whatever, but there will be a strong thread of that, empowering communities to look after themselves, basically. Um, I'm not saying we can dispense with governments. We can't. We have them. We do have governments, and we have to work with them, and we have to try and improve them, and we do have to try and vote sometimes, unfortunately, and all of that. But
Yes.
also, can the governments really respond to collapse? Are they even capable? Even if they were aware, would
Have
they be
we
even
seen it? Have we seen any evidence of it happening?
exactly?
No.
Exactly.
What do you think of the term international socialism?
Um, it sounds nice. It sounds very 20th century to me.
Very 20th.
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm all. I would say I'm an internationalist in the sense of I try and express solidarity with suffering people around the world and oppressive hierarchies around the world. Um, and I think some kind of in my ideal world, some kind of confederated international socialism might work, but I don't. I'm a bit skeptical of strong nation states. I think strong nation states are there to compete with each other and make enemies of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if there can be socialism without borders, I know it sounds
That's
very
no, this
utopian.
is exactly where I was going, and that's why I asked you because I'm right now grappling with the thought of, all right, international socialism, a borderless world, which may just happen because of the climate crisis, because of these things happening. And I thought you're the perfect person to ask if I'm on the right path of inquiry. That's all. I'm
Oh
always
well,
looking and
I would
always
say
learning.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I would say that the kind of socialism I personally lean towards is communalism, which is Murray Bookchin's
Yes.
kind of vision and social ecology. Some people call his brand of politics and action, they call it a kind of socialism, and other people call it a kind of anarchism. So it's kind of in the
Hmm.
middle.
Give us a
Or
little
it's
background on Murray for people that may not know. I know who he is, obviously, for years of, doing what I've been doing, but there might be
sure,
people that are watching us that don't know who Murray Bookchin is.
absolutely. So Murray Bookchin, um, he was based in Vermont, mainly in America, and from the 1960s, he wrote a lot and campaigned around left libertarian politics. So he actually started off as a Marxist. He came from a Marxist family. His parents were Marxists, but very young, while he was still very young, he rejected the kind of dogma of Marxism and the kind of authoritarianism element to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he became much more of an anarchist, kind of identified as an anarchist. And he did a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of writing. But then nature became increasingly important to him, like the domination of nature by human beings. And he's one of the few very left-wing, like anarchistic thinkers who really centers nature.
Right.
So he came up with this new kind of concept of social ecology. Like, so he kind of moved on. He went through Marxism, then he went through anarchism, and then he came up with a kind of synthesis, which includes some anarchist thought, it includes some Marxist thought, but it also includes very, very deep connection to nature. And his particular nature philosophy, which he bases everything else on, is called dialectical naturalism. And dialectical naturalism, there's many elements to it, but the most simple element to it, which I think is beautifully simple, is that we need to stop dominating each other as human beings and stop dominating nature, or rather, sorry, we need to stop dominating each other as human beings, and then we will be able to stop destroying nature. Right. And vice versa. We need to stop destroying nature in order to stop dominating each other as human beings. So social justice and ecological justice, that's kind of become quite trendy in the last few years, but still a lot of people don't really link them together enough, do they? So it's about, for Murray Bookchin, it was about getting rid of all hierarchies in order that we can protect or live in harmony with nature in what he calls an ecological society. And for him, an ecological society is decentralized communities of people all over the world, kind of confederated together. I would say it is a type of international socialism, what you said. But in his vision, there is a strongly anarchistic element. He retains from anarchism the idea of no state. And for most people, the idea of having no national government at all, only local governments, that for most people, that's like, whoa.
They can't, nobody can conceive of this.
Yeah.
Especially in the United States. Oh my
Absolutely.
goodness.
Yeah. So this kind of vision has gone into my Epic Tomorrows activist writing and YouTube channel and so on. And it's also informing my editing of the book. But I wouldn't say that most of the chapters come from a social ecological perspective. I mean, there is one chapter towards the end, which is different contributors, writers from the Institute for Social Ecology based in Vermont.
Very nice.
And one of those, Chaya Heller, who's actually my personal mentor, she was taught by Murray Bookchin. So there is a link.
Yeah.
And can I just I know I'm talking a lot. Can I just finish?
This is your show. Everybody, I am simply here for giving you a voice in a vehicle, which is my role.
Fantastic.
Keep
Thank
going.
you, Sandy. So, I explained that the first section of the book is kind of explaining to folk how serious the ecological crisis is, overshoot, the predicament. And because Arcbound doesn't usually publish books like this, I'm hoping that we will get through to some people who are not collapse aware, who will become collapse aware, or who at least will realize how serious even just the climate situation is. Because a lot of people think, oh, the IPCC are working it out.
Yeah,
but they're not.
They're not. So we know that.
As you know, yeah. So that's the first section. The second section is kind of revolutionary ideas and things, as I said, and communities, how they're responding. And then the third section, we're really going deep into collapse, or it could be, we haven't quite worked out yet. I've got volunteers working with me. One volunteer in particular, Aurora, I can't remember her surname, Souza, Aurora. Sorry, Aurora, if you're watching. I forgot your surname, but she's a really great climate and social justice activist from Brazil, and she's helping me with some of the editing of the kind of structure of the book at the moment. And we're not sure about how many sections, but it'll be 1 or 2 sections at the end will focus on collapse. And one of those chapters, I'm actually going to be sourcing accounts from societies that have already collapsed. Because,
Wow.
we talk a lot about, oh, society's collapsing and stuff, and we're in quite a privileged way sometimes. But what we should be doing is actually learning from people who have been through it. And how does that connect to the whole? So I'm talking about Haiti, Sudan, Myanmar. Um, Obviously, you've got the Gaza situation now, but that's more like war. That's a little bit different. But Syria, lots of places around the world that have experienced complete social collapse.
Wow.
And if I can get some of these guys, I have some contacts. I haven't actually got anything confirmed yet, but I'm sure I'll get some good accounts. Then maybe we can learn something from them rather
A-
than just having the global north
yeah.
perspective all the time.
Which is really important. You definitely have something there. Those
Fantastic.
stories have to be shared because nobody can make a change or know, how to survive without understanding others in those situations. And you're completely right. So thank you. I
No
look
problem.
forward to that.
Yeah, this is one of the chapters I'm most excited about, actually.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm actually going to be contributing a chapter myself. That's like the editor's privilege. I'm slipping in my own writing as well.
Which is very
And
nice. I like your writing.
yeah,
I've enjoyed reading your stuff.
amazing. So my own chapter is going to be more like a strategic focus because I'm a bit of a nerdy guy about strategy and not necessarily putting it into practice, although I hope I will get there one day, but just looking at different existing movements and groups and how could they
Yeah.
all connect together more and stuff like that.
And
Um,
there's quite a lot of them and they should be
yeah,
connected.
absolutely.
Well, I
Yeah.
think by virtue of the fact that we are in a collapsing societies in many, perhaps this is just a natural progression.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I came up with. I'm a fan of Jem Bendel's work. Like, I
Mhm.
don't always 100% agree with him, but
Mhm.
I pretty much, I read his recent. Well, it was last year, Breaking Together
Mhm.
book, and I was really astounded by that book. I thought it was like very impactful, um, and he obviously he started the deep adaptation
Yes.
stuff movement.
Oh yes.
But when I was reading his stuff, I thought there was something a little bit missing. And so I came up with this word. I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with this phrase, but he didn't talk about what I would call deep networking. And
Mm.
for me, deep networking would be partly what we're doing now is a form of deep networking. So like really more people connecting with other people from other countries and talking about these subjects and growing in resilience together. And I know a lot of people are doing this work. They just call it a different name. So this is just my typical northern white guy wanting to invent a term and everyone say, "Oh, that's a nice term."
It's okay. You could go for it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll be writing about this kind of stuff. And
Okay.
then the very last chapter, I'm really excited, will be by the Australian activist platform Just Collapse. I don't know if you've heard
Yeah,
of them.
oh, of course. I follow them. I've known them for
Yeah.
years.
So they're going to be, after all of these diverse and interesting perspectives, some of them very sober, some of them a little bit more on the positive side
Hmm.
or constructive, optimistic. Um, the very last chapter is going to be very sober and down to earth, and that their view is going to be very much we just don't know what's going to happen,
Right? We
and
don't.
and we can't. It's kind of a message in a way to all of the utopians that your revolution, forget about your revolution, you have to deal with collapse first, or at the same time, at least at the same time, maybe some kind of revolutionary action, maybe some kind of positive society can come out of this, but it's not a guarantee, and we have to be very realistic, and we don't know
Hmm.
what's going to happen. There probably will be a lot of war, there probably will be a lot of famine,
Is
disease.
is is
Yeah,
a lot of war.
I mean, there is, but absolutely.
You
But
think
but I mean,
you mean we ain't seen nothing yet? To
that's
put
kind
it
of what.
in a New
Yeah,
Yorker's term, yeah. Okay.
right. Okay, is
Hmm.
that where you're from?
I'm in Western New York, but
Oh,
yes, I'm from the area near the city, so you ain't seen nothing yet, baby.
yeah,
Mm,
I'm not so good at American accents, but I've suddenly realized now that you say it, it makes sense, and I'm listening to the accent.
yeah.
But yeah, so that's it. I mean, um, I think it's a really exciting book. And honestly, I did some market research for this book, and I honestly couldn't find, I'm not just saying this, I couldn't find any other book quite like this on the market already. And I, unfortunately, I do have to look at a bit of a marketing angle as
Mhm.
well, because it is a publisher,
Well,
and we do have to
yeah.
sell the book.
How are people
Uh,
supposed to hear about it without marketing it? Which is what you're
exactly.
doing with me right now, which is perfectly
Absolutely.
fine.
Yeah. Sure.
Right.
Sure. Thank
All right. Let me ask you about Michael Dowd and post Doom and what you know about he had passed away a year ago, Michael Dowd, and his post Doom work, which was about a post collapse society. And if you know Jordan and Karen Perry, who have taken the work of collapse acceptance, do you know them? Because it might
Yeah,
be.
well, I know of their work, and I've looked at the website, and I've seen them referenced, but I'm ashamed to say I haven't
Okay.
investigated. So maybe you can tell me more about them.
Well, I will send you, and I will set and hopefully share I will share this with Karen because I think they can be very helpful in this, and they talk about how to live meaningfully in a collapsing world, accepting
Hmm.
the collapse is inevitable and that it is where we are. And so I'm just, I like to put people together that are amazing. And I think that this might be another area for you
That
and
sounds fantastic.
arc.
Yeah, I'd love to
Okay,
make the
good.
connection.
And see,
Yeah,
we're doing it right here in the interview.
fantastic. So I've also forgotten to mention there's going to be a perspective, a couple of writers in the book from the solar punk movement perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know, but solar
Oh,
punk is,
mm-hmm.
yeah, visionary kind of art movement, which has a strong political element.
Yep.
And many people would say that it's very utopian and idealistic, and the solar punk artists might present visions of ecological cities full of geodesic domes and wind power and solar panels and direct democracy and social justice and everything being perfect and so on. And it was interesting talking to one of these contributors in particular, Luca Dowell, the host of Solar Punk Now, which is a podcast,
I heard of it.
and I'm going to appear on that as well, actually,
Great.
at some point next week. So yeah, I've two podcasts in 1 week, and I haven't been on any in my life before. So that's amazing.
Wow, you're a natural. You're doing very well then.
Well, thank you so much,
This is
Sandy.
great.
You're a very welcoming and relaxed host. So and you really listen and let me talk. So that's incredible. So yeah, Luca asked me some questions about is how can solar punk even coexist with collapse awareness, because solar punk seems to be a
Mhm.
very optimistic utopian movement, and my response was yes, it can. Human beings will always make art. It doesn't matter how bad things are collapsing. I think, you know unless you're just about to be killed by someone, literally, there's always space for making some kind of art. During World War II in Europe,
Mhm.
I'm sure many people felt like the world was collapsing, but people still made art. They still sung songs. They still danced. Um, and you had the surrealist art movement during World War II, and the surrealist artists, some of them were very political, like very anti-fascist. They didn't envision a future utopia, but it was like another world in a way. It was like a dream world.
Right.
So so I used this kind of analysis with Luca, and we were talking about it, and I realized that yes, there is a place for solar punk, because we need to envision the best possible collapse. We
Yeah.
need to envision like the best way to get through collapse, and that's not optimism. That's not hopium. That's
Well,
That's just trying to make the best.
yeah,
That's just trying to make the best
right,
pathway.
and they're out there. So why should they not be included in this? I see
Yeah,
exactly the thought process for that.
yeah,
And people can
that,
take what they need from it,
mm,
learning
yeah,
through this art, your vehicle, your book, and if it's not important to them, at least they've learned something.
yeah.
Very
That's it.
important.
And that I really appreciate what you just said about it's out there, exists, and we have to include them, because that's partly what my own chapter is going to be about. That you have so many people trying to impose their view of how we should change, like their version of revolution or whatever. And the sad thing is for me is I agree with a lot of these people's ideas, but the only thing I don't agree with is that they say, and everyone should be doing
Yeah,
this.
this is the
And,
only
and
way.
the only way. And if you
Yeah.
don't do this, you're betraying humanity. If you don't join in this protest or this social movement
Yeah.
or whatever, then you're betraying humanity. And that's where I sort of take issue a bit. And I would rather see more people, strategic diversity, I guess you would call it, strategic diversity,
I
and
like that.
just, yeah, accepting like different views on everything.
What do you say to those? And I know many of these people that think this way, that nothing will be accomplished without violence or a violent revolution, so to speak. What do you say to that?
Well, it's complex. I think many of the so-called non-violent revolutions historically, like Gandhi, Martin Luther King,
Hmm.
um, they've been whitewashed a bit. Those movements have been whitewashed a little bit. There were some violent tussles on the edges,
Okay.
and some scholars believe that the tussles and also the threat from this is the radical flank, what's known as the radical flank theory, that there was a more violent threat during Martin Luther King's time of was it
The Black Panthers.
yeah, I think
Hmm.
they overlapped, but I think they
Hmm.
were generally a bit later. But it was certainly linked with the Black Panthers and Malcolm X, and
Hmm.
there was a threat of something a bit more hardcore.
Hmm.
And so then to the American government, Martin Luther King suddenly looked very attractive. And so that you could say that's a non-violent movement that worked, but you could also say it was the threat of violence which also played a role there.
Ah.
So there's different ways of looking at things.
Holding it up as the okay, it could happen,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
not in a way where it's going to happen or else if you don't do this or else. That's
No,
not
no,
where we want to be
no,
at
not
all.
like that. No,
Right.
no, no. I wouldn't support that kind
No.
of. No, but the Black Panthers arming themselves in their communities because the white police were, racist police were walking around with their guns,
They
and
still are, hun.
yeah, and according to the American Constitution, if you can walk around with a gun, then that was the point of the Black Panthers walking around with guns. They're saying, look, it's in the Constitution. You're walking around threatening us with your guns. We're going to walk around with our guns, and they weren't actually shooting at people. I mean,
Right.
yeah, okay, there were a few shootouts in the end,
Hmm.
but but it was defensive, and that's what people don't understand about the Black Panthers. And I forgot to mention that's a really key thing is in the second section of the book, we actually have got confirmed the Washington branch of the modern Black Panthers. So that's really, really interesting for me because I know nothing about them. I know they're not all about violence for people who
Right.
don't know their history and everything. That they're very much about community resilience and building community resources and all of that.
Hmm.
So that's a really exciting chapter. I mean, the modern Black Panther. There are a few different modern Black Panther parties apparently, and they're not all aligned. Like there are a few people who call themselves the Black Panthers these days. It's a bit confusing, but this is one particular branch,
Okay.
and they seem great anyway. So that's quite a catch for me to
Yes,
get them in the book.
absolutely,
Uh,
because the book is really about diversity of thought
Absolutely,
and
yeah,
worldview.
and that
Very
and
good.
that was courtesy of Jason Baylor. So that he a radical guide So he was working.
Okay.
He's working with them to bring them on board. But yeah, back to the violence question. It's a reality. Violence exists,
Mm-hmm.
and I definitely don't advocate for violent revolution. I think it's a really stupid idea, and I think a lot of Western people who do advocate for that are romantic, and they don't realize how much it's going to hurt when they get shot in the head, or whatever. You know, they think it's going to be like in the movies or something.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be like in the movies, yeah, it will be like the worst parts of the movies. Yeah,
Yeah. You're like, boom, you're
but
dead. Yeah.
yeah,
And so is
so
everybody you love. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. But the reality is, in some parts of the world, I would never judge. I would never judge defensive violent movements who are just fighting for their lives. I wouldn't judge them. Like, for instance, in northern Syria, you've got the Kurds, the Kurdish
Oh,
people in northern Syria.
absolutely.
You know, like
Mm-hmm.
they're quite inspiring. You know, feminist and anarchistic socialist kind of movement they've got going there in northern Syria, where you've got the YPJ, the female militia, and the YPG, the male, like, and they fought against ISIS, you know, against Islamic State, and defeated them. Okay, with the help of a little bit of help from America, but they did a lot by themselves. And at the same time, they built this kind of revolutionary experiment in northern Syria at the same time as fighting against Islamic State. Can you imagine? I mean, that's kind of violent revolution in a way, but it's defensive. That
Mm-hmm.
it's quite a defensive revolution, and that they were protecting their territory largely, as far as I understand it,
Mm-hmm.
uh, fighting against Islamic State, which I think most people can agree is a pretty good sort of a pretty clear enemy. I mean, I hate all religious fundamentalism, whether it's Christian, Islamic,
Yeah,
but
because
yeah,
it's fundamentalism, but it's supremacism. And this is what we're
yeah,
seeing in the United States, in Israel, the supremacism of their religions, which is underscoring these
sure,
genocides and these awful situations. I agree with you there.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super complex in the Middle East, isn't it?
Super complex.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
I don't know what Trump's ascendancy is going to do to that situation, but it's probably not going to be good, is it?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I actually feel sick to my stomach thinking about what can happen right away in January over there to the
yeah,
rest of the people that have already suffered
mm,
hideously. But that's
yeah,
nothing new to the world.
yeah.
I mean,
So,
and you're going to illustrate it by bringing on people that have already experienced collapse in their society. So this is really positive from a negative.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And some of those accounts, there might be some violence involved because that's the reality on the ground. But it's not going to be, as we've established, it's not going to be you better do what I say, or I'm
Right.
going to. It's more like defensive
Mm-hmm.
violence against, you know, roving gangs or whatever, you know, defending yourself against these people.
Yeah. Okay.
Gail Bradbrook, actually, who's writing the forward, um, I saw a video of her recently to kind of get more of an idea of what she might write in the forward for the book. And everybody thinks of her, well, not everybody, but some people think of her as a kind of bit of a hippie, like what founder of Extinction Rebellion and
Right.
peace and love. But actually, like, she's quite realistic. And in this talk I saw her give, she said, you know, we need to get real because if society collapses and somebody comes with a knife for your children, you're not going to sit there singing "Kumbaya." That's what she
No.
said. So
No, I'm with her
that's
100%.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. You know, violence only by necessity, not as a kind of dominant strategy. That's what I would say.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I respect, you know, different. It's interesting that you know people who actually think it should be a
Mm-hmm.
strategy to use to
Mm-hmm.
a central strategy to use
I know
violence. So,
people that think all over with so many different worldviews, and it helps me
sure.
shape my own, which I would
Mm,
never force on anyone else. Because as
mm,
an educator, with a YouTube channel, this is what you do. You bring on all the different worldviews, and then people that are watching are going to make up their mind for themselves whether they say, "Oh, I'm going to be participating in this. I buy what this person's saying," and you're articulating it well.
Great. I mean, I would say, if society is collapsing, and me and you think it is, and will do further, then it would make sense, even if we try as much as possible to stay with nonviolence. At the same time, I think it is quite important for anyone watching to learn some self-defense skills if you don't know them already.
My thought was right there.
Was
Unreal.
it?
The
Great.
self-defense. I mean, I'm completely 100% with you there. And I am one of
Yeah.
those people.
Yeah, because like, especially, I don't want to be patriarchal or sound sexist or patronizing, but generally, a lot of women have weaker sort of upper body strength than men, and so for women in particular who are going to be vulnerable to violence and rape, in a broken down society, I would particularly, think that they should learn some serious
That's not
self-defense skills.
patriarchal. That's reality
Yeah,
of being a
yeah,
woman. And I have
yeah, yeah,
been in situations where that were not good. And that's just our reality. And in the United States, it's only going to get worse because of the supremacism that we are witnessing percolating to the top. I call it trickle down fascism, but percolating,
yeah,
or trickle up fascism, trickle down fascism, but it's what's happening here. And a lot of people are fearful, but you have to prepare for that. And you do have to become strong. You can't
yeah,
sit back and just live in fear.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
I won't.
Great. So yeah, I mean, um, that's all I can think of on the book right now. But except to say, except to say to everyone watching, please donate. We've done really well, me and a little team of volunteers. We've got to £3,500 now. We've made that,
Okay.
but we have to hit the 5,000 or about. It could go slightly below, but pretty much 5,000. So we've made 70%. We're
Good.
70%, but we've only got 1 week for the last 1,500,
All
which is
right.
quite a tall. That's quite a
I'll get this
tall.
out. And anybody that's listening, please, if you can afford something, this is a very worthwhile project.
Thank you, Sandy. Also, I should say, just a £10 donation, which is about $13, I think, gets you an e-copy of the book. So you're essentially just pre-ordering the book if you donate
Right.
now.
I think that's what I
But
did today, but it was
yeah,
20 pounds.
that that's probably, you clicked on giving an extra £10 to Arcbound Foundation.
Okay.
You can just click on no donation to Arcbound Foundation, and just £10 for the e-copy of the book, and then or £20 for a physical copy of the book as well. And then there are different bundles. You can get more books for higher donations. And if you donate, I can't remember the level, could be above £50 or something, which is quite a lot. Then the reward includes some writing mentoring from myself. So
Very nice.
for any
Really?
writing project that you're working on.
Oh, that's cool.
But
Will you be doing an audiobook, or is this something really that's interactive that people need to feel and read themselves? Because people's attention span, including mine, since the social media revolution, are like the size of a penny.
Yeah. Well, I would love to do an audio version. We're a very small charity publisher based in the UK, and like the fundraising landscape is very difficult at the moment. So if we can get the funds within the next week to ensure this book goes ahead, and then if enough people promote it, I'm going to work hard on making partnerships with people to promote the book. And then if it sells well enough as well, on top of that, then we might be able to make just a little bit. I mean, it's a not-for-profit,
Yeah,
but we
I'm
might be able to do an audio
all right.
book.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking of an audiobook could be volunteers just to read one chapter each.
Sure.
And that could be a way for you to do it audio. I mean, Michael Dowd in his writings, he used to read his own stuff. He read
Right.
Overshoot, William Catton's
Yeah.
Overshoot. He read it. So there's ways to do things that may not have to cost,
That's
depending
true. That's
depending
totally
on
true.
what kind of voice. Like I probably would not say I would be a person that would want to narrate it, read it. But there are those that might want to volunteer that have lovely voices with no, ridiculous inflection that could help. So there's something to think
Yeah.
about.
That is something to think about. That's a
Hmm.
very, very good idea. I'm definitely going to think about
Yeah,
that.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that would like to volunteer to do things like that. It's meaningful.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. And that will bring it to a wider audience, as you said.
Hmm.
People driving to work can listen to it and
Yes. Do it
all of that.
exactly. I'm out in my garden and I'm always listening to either audiobooks or certain podcasts. I'm working and listening and learning at the same time.
It's also really important for partially sighted people. Actually,
Yes, great.
there's a guy that got in touch with me and he asked me, will there be an audio version?
All
And I knew
right.
that he was partially sighted. So yeah, for partially sighted and blind people, that would be
Okay.
amazing as well. Yeah.
Well, then, anybody out there who would like to volunteer their voice in reading a chapter of this, you can contact Matthew, and that would be great.
Absolutely.
All
Thank you,
right.
Sandy.
Well, I've very much enjoyed learning about this project and ARC publishers and everything you've discussed. I would like you to give us a closing of what you'd like to say to those of us that will be watching and following the
Okay.
project.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, Sandy, for having me on the podcast. Like I was checking out some of your videos again earlier, and I really like your content, and you do some really fun stuff as well. For everyone watching, just please give this book a chance. It really
Yes.
is a very unique book. There isn't, as far as I'm aware, there is no other book that exists which combines collapse awareness, the climate crisis, and multi-author perspectives from around the world, including
Yes.
people who have already been through collapse. As I said, we've got some really exciting, diverse voices. We've got the Black Panther Party, Washington branch. We've got solar punk perspectives. We've got a very respectable climate scientist, Bill Maguire from the UK. We've got Gail Bradbrook, co-founder of the Extinction Rebellion movement. We've got Brian Tokar, who's a climate justice activist and author. He's also on the social ecology side, Murray Bookchin side.
Hmm.
And yeah, we've got Violet Material from Kenya, like amazing ecological
Magnificent.
anti-colonial activist, gathering community accounts. So yeah, it's a big party of a book. Oh,
But this is great. Thank you.
that's really nice.
All right, everybody.
So,
Well, this has been wonderful. We've learned something and we have something to look forward to, something that we can really put our hands around, put our minds around, and hopefully bring a lot of meaning to what our lives, what the next step is in all of our lives everywhere around the world. Thank you, Matthew.
thanks, Sandy.
Well, welcome to Environmental Coffee